Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive.
Quite frankly, I get most of my news from you.
Joan Esposito.
Y'all ready for this?
On WCPT 820.
Well, it's Friday, and don't you feel proud of yourself? You made it to another weekend. And so did I. And I got to tell you, there were days earlier in this week where it was a near thing. Anyway, I think I'm pretty much back to 100%, though I will tell you that this most recent round of COVID kicked my butt. Kicked my butt. I got a little bit complacent. You know, I've had it before multiple times. It's not that bad. Well, you know what? Just because you've had an easy time of it doesn't mean that every time will be an easy time of it. So please, please, over the holidays, take care when you can, especially if you are traveling. Planes themselves, from what the doctors tell me, the actual aircraft when you are flying isn't really a source of COVID. I guess a lot of the aircraft have put in these new HEPA filters, but airports, whoo! Airports, yeah, that's a different story. So getting to the airport, picking up your bags and getting out of the airport, please be careful. A lot of people are going to be traveling this holiday season. You have the same assignment that you do every weekend, and that is to get out and find some joy, do something fun. Ray and I last night went to see at Northlight Theater their production of Little Women, which I highly, highly, highly recommend. It was wonderful. And I got to tell you, I didn't like the book. So I went with, shall we say, a soupçon of skepticism. And I was really, really pleasantly surprised. The play combines the story of the book with interspersed with Louisa May Alcott's real life, because the book was actually based on her and her sisters, and so it's a real interesting play. It is more than just simply a repetition of what you read in the book. Anyway, like I said, I thought it was 5 stars. Just a great cast, well acted. Also, you know, our good friend Tony Fitzpatrick is having, at his new gallery, he's having, let's see, I think I got the dates, tomorrow and Sunday from 1 to 6. His new gallery is 2034 North Damon. He's not on Milwaukee anymore. So he's got a bunch of etchings, and the invite I got said, 1 to 6 p.m., 2034 North Damon, come through, bring your dog. If you follow Tony on social media, he takes pictures of the dogs that are walked in front of his studio. It's really a collection of the dogs of the neighborhood. So there's 2 ideas from me. A Lightscape, which, of course, I was going to go to and then decided to stay in bed with COVID. You know, going out to the theater last night, Ray realized, he said, this is the first time in 10 days that you have left the house. He's not wrong. Lightscape is still going on at the Botanic Garden. I didn't make it this year. I gave my tickets away, but I heard it was great. So, what are you going to do this weekend that brings you joy? This is going to be more and more important as Donald Trump gets sworn in as our next president and begins doing everything in his power to dismantle this democracy that we love. Again, we all can't do everything. So choose the cause that is near and dear to your heart. You know, if it's libraries, do everything you can to fight book banning. Go to your library board meetings. Pay attention to who's being put up to run for those seats. If women's issues are near and dear to your heart, start subscribing to Jessica Valente. Jessica Valente, if you may have heard the interview I did with her, she only writes about abortion. Abortion Every Day is her Substack. She is really hoping to get some more paid subscribers so that she can continue focusing. That's women's autonomy. That's it. That's her whole purview. If that's what's important to you, how can you get involved? Is there a local Planned Parenthood you can support? There are a lot of organizations that have recently come to prominence, organizations that help women in other states, help them, find transportation, find lodging if they need to come here to have an abortion. And we also need to keep an eye as Trump takes office. We need to keep an eye on the red states because they're getting ready to try to pull a new maneuver. They are trying to put forth potential laws that would restrict travel. One of the founding tenets of the United States is that we are the United States. We can travel from state to state. Nobody can stop us from doing that. Well, the people who want to punish women want to do just that. They've been trying to craft different laws that will make it illegal to travel out of state, particularly with a minor. You got a 16-year-old who's pregnant? Doesn't matter. It was her stepfather who did it. If these laws get on the books in some of the reddest states, you will basically be forcing that rape victim, forcing that incest victim, forcing them to carry to term if they are not allowed to travel to another state to get health care. And the person, the adult who's advising them, that's the one they're going to go after. It is literally our worst nightmare. Anyway, I digress. Find a cause that motivates you, something you feel passionate about. Maybe it's voter registration. Getting more people to vote. Getting more people, learn how to register voters. It's not hard. If you aren't sure what to do, you can even help out if you never leave the comfort of your couch. You may remember when I chatted with the woman who does the newsletter, Chop Wood, Carry Water, Jessica Craven. Well, first of all, I think we're going to have her back in the next week or two. But her newsletter is free. You can do a pay version, but you can get a lot of her recommendations in her free version. And she will say, look, this issue is coming up. This issue is the senators are going to be weighing in on this issue. And she says, this is what you do. Here's the phone number. Here's the script. Dear Dick, I'm a constituent of Dick Durbin. And, this Senate Bill 50,010 is coming up for a vote. And I want Senator Durbin to know that I feel very strongly about this and that he should be a no vote or a yes vote on this bill. You can do that. I've heard some people say that with the coming Democratic crisis, that if you are not calling your representatives at least once a week, you are not doing your part. And a real easy way to find out what's going on is to Chop Wood, Carry Water, subscribe to it. And again, she lays it all out. This is the House is considering this. Here's how you find who your congressperson is, and here's how you find their phone number. And you call them up, and here's the script of what you say. Honestly, it's really easy. I've done it. I don't do it every week, but I have definitely. I did it recently when Brad Schneider was a yes vote on that House Bill 9495, the one that would give Donald Trump the power to declare any nonprofit a terrorist linked organization and shut it down. Initially, there were a number of Democrats that voted yes, and it was coming up for another vote. And I called Schneider's office, and I said, look, I'm a constituent. I don't want Brad Schneider voting for this. Unfortunately, he was there when the final vote came. There were only a handful of Democrats who voted yes. Sadly, he was one of them. I'm not saying that every time you call, you'll get what you want. But I read somewhere that most staffers, congressional staffers, Senate staffers, they strongly believe that because most people don't do this, most people don't take the time to call, they believe that each call they do get probably represents 300 other people who feel the same way but didn't pick up the phone. So that phone call that you make carries a lot of weight. Figure out what you're passionate about. Figure out how you can be involved. What do you care about? What do you care about enough to show up, to march, to donate, to make phone calls about? We've all got to do our part, but you can't do everything. That will overwhelm you to the point where you don't do anything. So that's your assignment this weekend. You have 2 assignments this weekend. Have some fun. Get out of the house. I don't care if it's cold. Bundle up. Get out of the house. And figure out what it is that you really care about and want to fight for. And again, for those of you who work weekends, whether you work in the emergency room or whether you work retail or any of the other many things that keep our world going, you know, maybe you're the plumber who's available on weekends. You know, maybe if there's a storm, you're you work for the electric company and you can splice our wires back together. Thank you, thank you, thank you for that. I'm going to take a real quick break. It is Friday, the first half of the show. We take your calls, 773-763-9278, 773-763-9278. We're going to get to it right after this.
This is WCPT 820, where facts matter. Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
Let's get right to the phone lines, 773-763-9278. Jim is on the line. Hey, Jim, how are you today?
Hi, Joan. If I was in the Salem witch trials with the Supreme Court, I would be fully prepared to be burned at the stake. I'd have to figure out what was the quickest way to do it. Yeah, they had General Dysphoria from Tennessee. The 6 judges were arguing absolute insanity on the bench, saying that medicine and the caring for these kids doesn't make any sense because our religion dictates that they should not be given this medicine, just like women should be given the medicine they should be doomed to servitude on religious reasons. And that is what's really disturbing, Joan. Yeah. And the arguments out of Tennessee, again, another enlightened state. The other decision came from another enlightened state in where the Huckabees roam, Arkansas. Mississippi, I'm sorry. But it's amazing. They're arguing. You listen to their arguments, you can't believe it.
I know.
You've got 3 judges
and
that are
according to the reporting, Jim, you've read it exactly right. according to the reporting, because a lot of times if you're a reporter and you cover the U.S. Supreme Court, you can get a feel based on the questions they ask, the comments they make while they are hearing arguments is generally considered a pretty good barometer of how their decision will go. And in this case, which came out of Tennessee and wants the state of Tennessee to have the right to ban physicians from giving any kind of gender-affirming care, particularly gender-affirming medicines, to minors. Whether or not they have parental support, that's not the issue. The issue is just the state of Tennessee doesn't want it to happen. They want to be very trans-unfriendly. And the reporting that I've read, Jim, says that based on how the justices are talking and the questions they're asking, that it appears that this decision is going to be done on party lines. And we know what that means.
And Joan, what really the overarching effect of this is people in difficult circumstances won't be available to this medicine. People that aren't in difficult circumstances can get the medicine, just like a woman can get health care in a pregnancy. This is absurd. This is war against the poor. It's war against the disadvantaged. And I didn't think I could live in the United States of America when they would make war against the disadvantaged. I can't believe I'm in this situation. And with the cronies that this lunatic is putting in, it's all cronyism. I mean, they're one billionaire after the next billionaire. And are these supposed to be conservatives? Joan, the only thing I can say, but the only thing conservative when I was a kid, very conservative, well, they were deficit hawks. But the problem with it is they haven't had a deficit hawk since I don't know when. There isn't. I mean, Reagan wasn't one.
No, anybody who calls themselves a Republican now, they have no resemblance to the Republican Party that you and I knew for years. All the things. I mean, the Republican Party used to believe in small government, which means as little government interference as possible, which means government getting out of the business of regulating abortion and gay marriage. You know, that was like, that was not what government was supposed to be doing. Government was supposed to be doing the bare minimum. The Republican Party that we knew from when we were younger also was very pro-USA, very anti-dictatorship, anti-Russia, anybody who wanted to be an authoritarian or a fascist. And that's clearly not the case anyway. It's almost like the Republican Party as it exists now is almost like a mirror image of what it used to be. Everything that they used to believe, they don't believe, and everything that they didn't believe, they now embrace. It's just insane.
Right. And absolutely, but it's coming down on the heads of the disadvantaged.
It always does. I mean, you think that
I know it does. I know, you're right.
This is a Republican Party that's all about the 1%, all about the 1%. They're not going to do. That's why you're going to get the big tax breaks. That's why they want to deregulate so corporations can do whatever they want. It's all the Republican Party. It just amazes me that so many blue-collar folks voted for Donald Trump because the Republican Party is the party of the elites. No question about it.
Yeah, I know, but I can't. But is it really true that Musk did it on the internet, that he pinpointed these, like the Russians did in the 2016? They can actually pinpoint, and by people scrolling, they can actually
micro-targeted ads. That's what they're called, Jim.
Yeah,
and
but
yes,
I know,
he spent millions of dollars on micro-targeted ads. That apparently, from the one report I read, the goal was not to try to get people to vote differently. It was to just convince people to stay home, that either their vote wouldn't matter or they should be so disgusted by what was going on. Just don't vote at all. They really show them that you protest. Don't vote at all.
Yeah, but how can they fall for that, Joan? I don't understand how they could live in America and fall for that nonsense. But here we're in a web of insanity for 4 years with cronies. I mean, these people he's picking, one is crazier than the other one. They're all billionaires. And all they're thinking about is even making more money and stealing as much as they can steal. It's incredible.
Jim,
but anyway,
I don't know if you saw this. I saw it. Let's see, this is during the week. I must have seen it on MSNBC. There was a panel just recently, and they were interviewing a bunch of steel workers because, U.S. Steel and the Japan company Nippon Steel wanted to merge. And at first, American workers were really against it, but then the people from Japan came over, made a presentation of the plant that they work in. They promised that they weren't going to close it. Not only were they not going to close it, they were going to spend like $86 million, modernizing the plant. And so the workers got behind the deal, and they were like, yeah, let's do this. And apparently the Trump administration has decided no, it's not gonna happen. They're not gonna support it. And I saw a panel with steel workers, and they were like, "Oh, we're really surprised. Like, that's not what he said when he was campaigning. That wasn't what he said. I don't understand how he changed his mind. I don't understand how he's doing this." And I'm thinking to myself, seriously, you took him at his word? When you know that this is a guy who has been anti-union every chance he's gotten?
In January 6th, I watched them say, if you don't attack the Capitol, you won't have a country anymore. We're the enemy within. I mean, don't they listen to what he's saying? We're the enemy within. They
Apparently not.
Kamala Harris the Antichrist at one of his right at the convention or right after the convention. I mean, they don't listen to that apparently. But anyway, Joan, I hope you have a terrific weekend. I hope you feel like a million times better. And I think you had some fun last night. Anyway, Joan, thanks for taking my call. Have a great weekend. Thank you, Joan.
Thank you, Jim. We are going to take a break. We're going to be back with more calls right after this.
There's no excuse to miss Joan Esposito.
It's number one on my stereo.
Live, local, and progressive. You can listen to her daily at WCPT820.com on your computer or phone.
This is Chicago's Progressive Talk, 820 AM, WCPT Willow Springs, and online at WCPT820.com, where facts matter.
Joan Esposito. Join the conversation now at 773-763-9278.
I'm trying to use the phone!
Joan Esposito. Live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
It is Friday. We spend the first half of our show on Friday taking your calls. Let's go to Franklin Park. Al is on the line. Hello, Al. How are you?
I'm pretty good for a Friday. I had a question. When you got back on Wednesday, you were talking about the fact that there was an effort when the Trump came into office the first time to save all the information off the government websites, and I really didn't even hear much about the information that time, but I'm just thinking that is so important, especially this time, because there's a lot of good information on where we are with renewable energy, where we are with health care, where we are with foreign policy, and somehow that has to be, all archived outside of the, all three branches of government, because they're all, going to be compromised when Trump gets in there.
You are 100% correct. And our good friend Jennifer Schulze, who joins us when we do our media segments, she's been writing about this. I'm trying to find the article, but she did. She has written about this that. Like Trump wants to get rid of the National Weather Service or privatize it. So all the data, things like on the for the transportation agency. Right now, on the government website for the transportation department, you can go on and you can find out what your rights are. You get bounced from a flight. What are your rights? And the belief is that as soon as Trump takes over, all this stuff or a lot of this stuff is going to disappear. And I know that when Trump came in the first time, a lot of the agencies made it very easy. They created downloads where you could download their data, which is good because, again, Donald Trump made a lot of anything to do with global warming. They took down. Apparently, there's a Republican, I can't remember if it's a congressman or senator, who created some. I think it was a congressman, name escapes me, who said that they wanted to create a bill and so that the congressional record, somebody would have to go back through the congressional record and strip out the word Gaza, that Gaza was not going to be allowed to be talked about in the congressional record anymore. I mean, this is really, really crazy times. But you're absolutely right. And, people are saying, go to the Transportation Department website, download the Traveler's Bill of Rights and what to do and when to do it, because it is after January 20th, it is not going to be there. There have been reports that airline companies are already lobbying the Trump administration to take this kind of consumer information off the government websites.
Yeah, correct. And the one thing that I'm even more concerned about is where we are, like in the sciences. Like, we hear this thing that we've put all this money to put in charging stations, and only one or two have been opened, and that's, I'm sure, because there's a lot of planning to make sure they go in the right place and they are going to be the most useful, and we can't burn the bridges on all that work that's been done, and it's happened before, and let's get into classified information. There, not that we need to see it, but even our foreign policy and where we are at on all this stuff, somehow that's got to be saved outside of the by government, so it can't be tampered with, so we know where we are right now, because so many, we always go backwards. We don't have the continuity from when we get a Republican administration in there, we lose ground.
Yep.
So,
you are absolutely correct. You are absolutely right about that. And if there is if you're somebody who really, enjoys looking at some of this data on some of these sites, I'm telling you right now, you better start downloading it. We saw data disappear from government websites. The CDC. What are the most recent COVID recommendations? All that kind of stuff. It is going to go away. And so pay attention right now and save what you think is important, because he did it before. He's going to do it again.
Yes, and it's going to turn into propaganda websites, worship.
Yes, that's the fear. Last time he just took the information down. The fear is that this time around, they will replace it with disinformation.
Well, we had some of that, too, with the CDC, before.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So I have lots more to say, but I'll save that for another time.
Okay. Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Let's go to Rockford, Illinois. Andy is on the line. Hello, Andy. How are you?
Hi, Joan. How are you?
Peachy.
Well, I hope.
Yes.
My comment is Trump may be absolutely right about this U.S. Steel proposition. You may consider what happened in 2023 when Stellantis said during a union negotiation that they were going to spend $5 billion in my neighboring town of Belvedere, Illinois, on the Chrysler facility there.
Yeah, I do remember that. And I also remember Carrier in Indiana. You know, Donald Trump made a big deal about going to Indiana and saying, you know, this plant's not going to close. This plant's going to stay. And everybody was like, yay. And then the plant very quietly closed and went away.
And Foxconn and Racing.
Yes. Well, the only upside is that this wasn't, Nippon didn't make this promise to Donald Trump. You know, this was in the works before Trump's election. And, you know, I don't know the reliability of Nippon, but if the steel workers who have a lot to lose, if they looked this deal over and decided it was in their best interest, I trust them. I trust them to know that a potential merger, which I'm sure they have a lot of concerns about, if they've decided that it's a good deal, then I think we got to go with that. Anyway, I think we lost Andy, but that's okay. We should probably take a break, Lady B. We are going to take a break. We've got lots more to talk about. We'll be right back after this.
Take Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive with you on the go by using the TuneIn app on your phone. Just search for WCPT 820.
You're listening to WCPT 820 because facts matter.
Now back to Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
It is Friday. We spend the first half of the show on Friday taking your calls, talking about the news of the day. I did want to share with you a couple of things. Tim Walz gave an interview to a local Minnesota television station. And first of all, he has said publicly he's contemplating another run for governor. He hasn't made up his mind yet. That when he makes that decision, he'll let us know. But they asked him about the election. You know, did he see the loss coming? Would he do anything differently? They asked him a lot of really interesting questions in the wake of this resounding loss that occurred. And, you know, he answered just like you would hope Tim Walz would answer. Lady B, let's play that now.
History will write that. It wasn't my decision to make. That was the vice president's decision. You know, did they make the right, as I said, in this campaign, when you asked the question, are there things you could have been done differently? Since we lost, the answer is obviously yes. On this one, I did the best I could. I felt like at the rallies, at the things I was going to, the shops I was going in, that the momentum was going our way. And it obviously wasn't at the end of time. So, yeah, I was a little surprised. I thought we had a positive message, and I thought the country was ready for that.
Yeah. Tim, so did we. In what time is it? At 3:30 today, we are going to be joined by John Shaw, who's the director of the Paul Simon Public Policy Institute. And one of the things there was, when that sound clip was posted, there was a lot of really interesting commentary on social media, and people made a lot of really interesting points. And one of the ones that I want to ask John Shaw about is there's a belief in some quarters that Tim Walz was sort of shunted aside, really not given prominent speeches or appearances in the campaign, that it was a specific decision to kind of sideline him. And because with 2020 hindsight, the question is, was that if indeed that was a conscious effort, was that a bad decision? Because it was, generally speaking, non-college educated voters, blue-collar voters who put Trump back in office. And those were the voters that Tim Walz seemed to have just an incredible rapport with. So was he sidelined? And was that a big mistake of the people running this campaign? We'll talk to John Shaw about that. Let's go back to the phone lines right now. Andy is in Rockford, Illinois. Hey, Andy. Thanks for joining the conversation today. Oh, okay, sorry. Steve from the Gold Coast.
Hello.
Hi, Steve.
Hello. Happy Friday. You caught me off guard there. You jumped to another caller.
Yeah.
But, yes, I realize not everybody's there all the time. So, I wanted to raise a couple of points. Keep in mind, I know, we're all a bit fatigued, and sometimes we're just hoping that, we can stop thinking about this for a while. But, keep in mind that the House of Representatives, is back in session very early on in January. And currently with the makeup of the House, they've got about a 5-person lead over the Democrats in terms of the majority. But also keep in mind that you've got 3 individuals who are going to be tapped. So you've got Stefanik, Matt Gaetz is resigning, and Walz is probably out of Florida going to resign. And so what you're going to see is basically a 217 to 215 lead. That means that one defection means that you can get a tie vote. Or if somebody doesn't show up, misses a flight, is sick, whatnot, so, anything can happen. So the prediction is that while they have their time in power and they have more of a majority, they're going to try and push through as much as they can in the House those first few weeks. So it's not going to be, it's early January, the inauguration is in 3 weeks. We can just kind of, figure nothing's going to be going on. Actually, a lot's going to be going on in Washington because of that razor-thin majority.
Yeah.
So, like I said, as you said, call, text, do anything that you can. And I can't emphasize this enough. I know young people love to text. Some of them like to email. Calling is worth 100 times what any of those are worth. A lot of the people who serve in Congress are older. Their chief of staff is older, and a telephone call says something very different than, a 2-second text, which nobody's going to read by and large. So, just keep that in mind. And like I said, be prepared. The fight goes on. It's time to get up off the mat. We got beat. But now it's time to try and just hold as much ground as we can and moving forward, and then hope that, we can survive the next 18 months. After that, we're talking about people already concerned about running for midterms. So you're not going to be getting much in the way of legislation after that. And then if we can take back even one of the houses, that would be a huge advantage as far as keeping Donald Trump's agenda at bay. And if we could take the House and the Senate,
Steve, this is where, I've talked about this idea that some Democrats have that maybe over the next, at least the first 2 years, maybe we don't fight every crazy idea Donald Trump has. Donald Trump has said that, the first thing he wants to do is just deport. That's going to be the first order of business. And as painful as it is, maybe people need to see this, just like the steel workers. Oh, he didn't say he was going to do that. He said he was on our side. Well, you know what? This is the guy who joked with Elon Musk and said, man, you're doing it right. As soon as they complain, you fire them. I mean, anybody who paid the smallest amount of attention could see that wasn't going to be the case. But if we let some of the horribleness take effect, then in the midterms, maybe we get both houses back.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't mean to sound callous, but there are distinctions to be made between the different sorts of people who might be deported. If, in fact, Donald Trump wants to target violent criminals who have continued to remain in this country, knowing full well that if you do commit any number of crimes in America as a non-citizen, you are eligible for deportation, I don't think many Democrats are going to mind that. We're not going to be in the streets, declaring how horrible that is. And, and there's a difference between somebody who's been here 20 years, working, paying their taxes, and doing everything that they're supposed to do, versus, quite frankly, some of the people who gamed the system and said, I'm an asylum seeker a few years ago, knowing full well that they don't qualify, that the first judge that sees them is going to review their case and say, you don't qualify as an asylum seeker. You came here seeking economic betterment, but that doesn't qualify as an asylum seeker. And, let's face it, a lot of people knew what they were doing when they did that. It was just a way to get in. And I don't blame people for wanting a better life, but there are a few 100 million people around the world who would qualify under that same standard. So, yeah, we have to pick our battles. And as much as I would think that America should be a country that is open and welcoming to people because we need immigrants, it also needs to be fair. And because there are a lot of people all over the world that are waiting to come here, doing it the right way. And I think you send a bad message when you say, if you get here, and you just manage to stay long enough, we're just going to forget everything that, that our immigration laws are supposed to represent. We're not really going to enforce them. I think that's a bad message, and that's the one that's existed for decades, and it's created a lot of the immigration problem. We do need to enforce our immigration law, especially with regard to criminals who are in this country, especially with regard to violent criminals.
Oh, I don't think anybody would disagree with that. As a matter of fact, but that's not what Donald Trump has said. That's what some of the people believe. Oh, I'm a good immigrant. Donald Trump isn't going to come after me. Well, actually, he has said through his own posts and also Tom Homan, who's now going to be the border czar. It doesn't matter if you've got a criminal record or not. If you are not a citizen, you are going to be eligible for deportation under the Trump regime. That's...
Yeah, and you're right.
They've all made it quite clear.
Political. Yeah, and that would be political suicide for them. I think that if they do stick to the whole notion of find criminals, especially violent offenders and repeat offenders,
I don't think they care. Honestly, this was the administration that created the child separation policy that was done with the stated objective of creating fear. They wanted people to be afraid that they would lose their children if they showed up in this country. I don't think they're not going to care what the media reports or what people think.
Well, like I said, if they are as stupid as we both suspect they are, then that will be, I think, the agenda. If they're sort of more pragmatic and realize that, we don't have the manpower, we don't have the resources, none of that is possible. It's certainly not in any time in the next few years. You would have to build an infrastructure to actually do something about deporting masses of numbers of people, rather than focusing on actually deporting criminals. So, like I say, they can have that agenda, but hey, the other thing is that as soon as you deport some poor mother of two who's been here for 20 years and, again, doing all the right things, and, she's got family, she's got friends, she's got coworkers.
Man, this is unusual for us. I think you're being too optimistic. I'm much more pessimistic. You're usually the pessimistic one, and I'm the optimistic one. But when it comes to this, I don't know. I'd love to believe that that's how it's going to play out, but I don't, when you've got kids, when you've got babies being taken away, you tell their mother, we're just going to take the baby to get them a bottle, or we're going to take your little kids and, let them have a bath or a shower, and then the families never see them again. That is so cruel. That is so incredibly cruel. How could you get worse PR than that, Steve? And they don't care.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, their answer to this whole question about separating families with regard to, there are people who came to this country and they're undocumented, and then so their children are documented because they were born here, or perhaps one of them is naturalized, the other is not, that sort of thing. Their answer to this is, well, the ones who are American citizens are free to go with the ones that we're deporting. That's their answer to, we're going to separate families. And I mean, like I say, this I think sounded good to some people who are from the Hispanic community because they thought, it's not going to be us. It's just going to be the bad ones.
Yeah.
But as you point out, if they do, institute the kind of policy you're talking about, you're going to see a big change in voting patterns among the Hispanic community because virtually everyone in that community has a friend or relative that is undocumented.
Yep.
And, so what happens then in 2 years? You're going to see a very big turnaround with regard to, how we're going to be voting.
Yep. I agree. I absolutely agree. And I think that's, I think the midterms are going to be very interesting. And I pray that we can gather enough seats in the midterms to try to really put up some serious guardrails around Trump and his cabinet of his clown cabinet, his cabinet of curiosities. Yeah. Nope, that's too kind. I like clown cabinet
Absolutely.
better.
And lastly, if I might just lastly,
sure.
We can hopefully figure out a way to put an end or at least stymie MAGAism because, assuming Donald Trump acts like a normal human being and actually leaves office 4 years from now, there has to be someone to take up the mantle. But there's no one else who has that kind of cult of personality following that Donald Trump has. So where does MAGA stand once, Donald Trump says, I'm going to go play golf, or pretty much I'm too senile to know where, the bedroom is. So what happens then? Like I say, if we can damage them politically and let them just pretty much damage themselves, which is the stronger point, I think, does MAGA end? But then again, we made those predictions before. So who's to say?
Yeah. Thanks, Steve. I appreciate the call.
Take care.
We are going to continue to take your calls after we come back after the news. I just want to share a couple of the texts that we've gotten. Mark texted in that would it be a great idea for the DNC to buy MSNBC? The parent company has announced that they are spinning off. Oh, they're spinning off. Well, let's just put it this way. They're keeping NBC News, and they're keeping Bravo, and they're keeping Peacock. And they're pretty much everything else that's the NBC family. It's up for sale, or it will be at some point in the future, and nobody knows exactly what that's going to mean. But Mark's idea is that the Democratic National Committee buy MSNBC. Hey, I've heard stranger things. What's going to happen? That's anybody's guess. We're just going to have to kind of wait and see. Somebody else texted in, this is Larry from Wheeling, that he wanted to know, is it true that Jon Stewart is thinking about retiring to avoid prosecution from Trump's new DOJ? I don't watch Jon Stewart anymore. I think I used to feel that Jon Stewart and I were kind of in the same mindset, but I don't feel that way anymore. From the very first night when he went back and he said he was doing what felt very much like whataboutism between Biden and Trump, and he looked at the audience, and I think this was so tone deaf. He was like, you know what? No matter who wins the day after the election, after the election, you're going to be just fine. And I thought to myself, sure, you're an old, rich, white guy. You're going to be fine. But is everybody who's listening to you going to be fine? Are the young women watching your show going to be fine? No. And I thought to myself, what a tone-deaf comment to make. And I thought, if this is the new Jon Stewart, I don't want any part of this. And I haven't watched him since. And apparently he also was just on this big rant that somehow the pardon of Hunter Biden, apparently the pardon of Hunter Biden is just the end of democracy as we know it. Not, I think Joe Biden should issue a preemptive pardon to anybody who is on Kash Patel's hit list. I've got to take a break for news. We're going to have more callers and more texters right after this.
The Thom Hartmann radio program provides all of the intelligence, information, and insight you'll need to win the water cooler wars. Weekdays 11 to 2 right here on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk, where facts matter. Hey Google, play WCPT.
Streaming Chicago's Progressive Talk from TuneIn.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive.
The reason that I listen to you from the infamous other side, you will call a spade, and if it's indefensible, you will not defend it. And you know what? I can respect that.
WCPT 820.
It is Friday. We spend the first half of the show reading your texts, taking your calls, but there is something that I have to share with you. It is simply too good not to share. It doesn't really relate to the discussions we've been having in the last few minutes, but Chris Christie was being interviewed recently, and he said Trump is literally turning America into a joke. Chris Christie, who you might remember was a U.S. attorney from New Jersey, Chris Christie prosecuted Charles Kushner. Charles Kushner. Name sound familiar? Charles Kushner is Jared Kushner's dad. Charles Kushner, in an effort to intimidate a witness who was, by the way, his sister. Charles Kushner hired a prostitute to seduce said sister's husband. The video of that was recorded and shared with her, and it was made clear to her, apparently, that if she pursued testifying, that the video would become public. Well, it didn't work. He was convicted of witness tampering. He admitted his guilt, but he was later pardoned by Donald Trump. You want to talk pardons? I'm sorry. If you're going to talk about the Hunter Biden pardon, then you need to talk about the Charles Kushner pardon. Okay? And, yeah, he was pardoned. He got out of jail. And this convicted guy, you know what Trump is doing for him now? He is going to be the ambassador to France, and I bet France feels really special. Some people are saying that he's doing it basically as a way of letting France know just how little he values them. Yeah. Anyway, Chris Christie was the gentleman who prosecuted Charles Kushner, and this nominee to be the next ambassador to France was discussed by Chris Christie in a recent televised interview. This is too good to sit on. I want you to listen to this.
I want to talk about Jared Kushner because, frankly, it comes down that he's the one who fired you, right?
That's what Steve Bannon told me, yes.
And you believe that?
Sure.
Right. You believe that because there's history between the two of you.
Between me and his father, not between me and him.
But you can understand why he takes it personally.
Yes and no.
Would you separate your experience if your father had been put in jail from the prosecutor who put him in jail?
If my father was guilty, I would. Mr. Kushner pled guilty. He admitted the crimes. And so what am I supposed to do as a prosecutor? I mean, if a guy hires a prostitute to seduce his brother-in-law and videotapes it and then sends the videotape to his sister to attempt to intimidate her from testifying before a grand jury. Do I really need any more justification than that? I mean, it's one of the most loathsome, disgusting crimes that I prosecuted when I was U.S. attorney. And I was U.S. attorney in New Jersey, Margaret, so we had some loathsome and disgusting crime going on there.
I thought that was too good to save. You needed to hear it. We are going to go back to the phone lines now. You know, before we broke for news, I had a discussion with Steve from the Gold Coast, and I thought he was rather Pollyanna. You know, if Trump tries to do this big mass deportation, obviously he's going to be splitting up families. Obviously, there's going to be people deported who didn't think Trump would point the finger at them. And he seemed to think that somehow people will, when these injustices happen, that somehow the Hispanic community will rise up and turn against Donald Trump, and that somehow that will rein in Donald Trump's behavior. I think that's, I thought that was a little Pollyanna. Let's go to the phone lines. Joe from Chicago told Lady B that he agrees with me on this. Hey, Joe, thanks for the call today.
Hey, thank you for taking my call. I don't know if you remember, but I did text you that I have a family staying with me from Venezuela also.
Yes.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think people need to get ready and just realize that they're going to do what they're telling you they're going to do. And
yes.
you better have a plan. I spoke with the family that's staying with me. There's a total of 6 people, and they seem to be under the impression that Chicago's a sanctuary city. I had to explain to them what that really meant.
Yeah, a sanctuary city, as I understand it, simply means that the Chicago Police Department are not going to be helping ICE. They're not going to be tipping ICE off as to where they can find illegals. That's all that means. Right. It doesn't mean that they're safe here.
And I explained to them that the federal government overrides everything. They can come knocking on the door at any time. But they're here legally. They have the paper, they have the work permits and everything. But I don't think that matters. It makes a difference to anybody. I think they're going to come in and start just racking people up and shipping them out. And God knows where they're going to ship them to.
Yeah, they've got to get a country, or at least, well, of course, Greg Abbott didn't ask anybody if they were willing to take the buses. And when Ron DeSantis sent a plane load to the Hamptons, he didn't, or Martha's Vineyard, he didn't ask anybody. But ideally, there has to be a country that's willing to take them. I mean, you can't just load them all up into a plane and fly it somewhere and then dump them all out.
Well, what I'm talking about is the interim. What do you do before you put are they going to make a camp or whatever? I mean,
Well, the state of Florida has offered the federal government, they have this 1,400-acre plot of land, and they have offered it to the Trump administration if they want to build a camp, an internment camp. The state of Texas is just peachy keen with having it right there, and they're offering up the land.
It's absolutely disgusting. It's just disgusting. And, and I got to tell you, John, some of my friends that know that I have these people staying with me, they're like, well, you better tell them to leave because, you could be arrested too. I'm like, well, you know what? Here's my response to somebody thinking like that. Somebody had to hide the Jews in the 30s. Mm-hmm. So maybe this is our time to step up and help people. Yep. And like I told my friends, I have no partner. I'm not married. I don't have children. They come knocking on my door, you better kick it in. Because I'm not going to stop doing what I'm doing because what I'm doing is right. I mean, I'm terrified, but I'm right on what I'm doing.
Yeah. And, I saw something recently that said, if you've ever wondered when you've read about World War II and the rise of Nazism, if you've ever wondered what kind of person you would have been then, look to what kind of person you are now. And, Joe, you're absolutely right. You would have been Oskar Schindler and trying to protect as many people as you could.
I just think it's ridiculous they're doing this.
Yep.
And it's disgusting. I mean, like I said, you do what's right, and we'll all work out somehow eventually.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think we've got a dark cloud coming our way.
Yep.
And Joe Biden is still the president. Donald Trump is still trying to figure out which loyalist he can shove down our throats where, and who the Senate will rubber stamp. But I think come January 20th, it's going to be.
The poop's going to hit the fan. Yep.
Yeah. Yep. Yes, indeed. Joe,
well,
thank you
have a
so
good
much.
Weekend, and you were right with Steve.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for the call, Joe. Appreciate that. Our good friend Dave from Hoffman Estates is on the line. Hello, Dave. How are you today?
Hey, Joan. I'm doing well. Hopefully you're doing the same.
Yeah.
And just as a side, when you talk about Chris Christie, didn't he, one time when he was in good with Trump, didn't he also help him with the presidential debate? That time he played either the Hillary or the Biden part?
He did prep him. During the first Trump administration, Chris Christie was dangled in front of him. I can't remember if it was chief of staff, but it was some really important position within the Trump administration. And he capitulated. He kissed the ring and was helping Donald Trump. And then Donald Trump got into the White House. And apparently Jared said, "Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? You're going to put this person in the White House?" And Mr. Christie found that there was no chair for him when the music stopped.
Yeah, and didn't Christie have that thing with Bridgegate or something that time?
Yeah, he was governor of New Jersey, and there was some mayor who wasn't doing something that Chris Christie wanted him to do. And the way it shook out, Chris Christie's aides took the fall, and I think at least two of them ended up going to jail. And supposedly, without any oversight or consultation from him, they decided to close all but one lane necessary to cross a bridge. And there were huge backups, and it was a complete disaster. And it came to light that they did it on purpose just to make life difficult for this mayor. And Chris Christie claimed, I think not very believably, that he didn't know anything about it. It was just his underlings doing something that they hatched on their own without any consultation from him. And they ended up taking the fall.
Yeah, kind of like Trump.
Yeah.
I was telling Lady B, you probably know that one already, that first one with that, when Trump picked that businessman, John Phelan, to be Navy Secretary, a man that had no military experience. And he's one that since 2009, when another guy by the name of Donald Winter finished up his 3-year term in that role of never wearing the uniform. Well, I was just telling Lady B that I read now the other day, the latest one he's picked, he nominated Daniel Driscoll to be the next U.S. Army Secretary. And his background lately has been he in venture capital and private equity firms.
Oh, well, that's a good. Yeah, there you go.
But he most recently worked as a senior advisor to J.D. Vance, because they were classmates at Yale Law School. And neither Driscoll or Phelan has served in senior military leadership roles in the past, but Driscoll himself had been in the Army in the 10th Mountain Division in Iraq or whatever as a cavalry scout platoon leader. So in other words, he was probably a lieutenant. And he also completed the Army Ranger School. That's kind of like, you remember back when Tom Cotton was wearing that beret or whatever, saying he was a Ranger. And Jason Crow had just totally emasculated and berated him because he himself was a true Ranger, and that because he was
Cotton
with the 75th.
had done like a weekend warrior class or something, and gotten his little pin.
Yeah, he was able to either have that shoulder tab to say that whatever, and that's what this guy, Driscoll, probably did the same thing when it just said that he had, a Ranger school. So it's probably the same thing. So, but
anywho, indeed. It's an any-who kind of day, isn't it, Dave?
Yeah, yeah.
Thanks for the call.
Before I close out, you think this gunner in New York, or wherever he's now, do you think he's going to end up kind of like that? You remember years back in Milwaukee that Laurencia Bambi Benbenik, that time, who was accused of killing her husband or whatever, and she was all over, and they used to say, like, run, Bambi, run, for a while.
I don't remember that. But, you know...
about 40-plus years, and then...
Yeah.
Or
I
will that
say,
other guy that jumped out of the airplane that they've never found.
D.B. Sweeney, right?
Yeah,
well, this... You know, the fact that this guy seems to have disappeared so thoroughly, the fact that he knew exactly where to find this guy, the fact that he used a gun with a silencer, I mean, this wasn't just some crazed, out-of-control person who was seeking revenge for something that had been done to their family. I mean, this guy is either a pro, or this was very, very, very carefully planned. I mean, you know, bit by bit, law enforcement is learning more about him, but they don't seem anywhere near close to catching him. And they know he's already left New York City, and, you know, they're trying to track his movements, but...
they said he knew how to handle weapons, obviously, when he cleared that jam, and then using the bicycle to because they're more mobile. And they said he came out of Atlanta on a bus.
Yeah, and was staying at a hostel, but used a fake ID and paid in cash.
Yes. Yeah, this guy definitely planned it out, but I wonder how he was able to find that this CEO on his on his own. You know, did he do that? You know, or did somebody tell him when that he was supposed to speak, right, at some meeting?
Yeah.
That morning?
Yeah. He was headed to an investor meeting, I think. I don't know. Yeah. It's very interesting. This is something that I think people are going to be writing about and reading about for a long time.
Yep. Let me clear off so you got others that have been waiting too. But
thanks,
have
Dave.
a good weekend, Joan. Thanks for taking the call.
Thank you. Let us go back to the phone lines. Our good friend Ron is on the line from Chicago. Hey, Ron, how are you?
Oh, very good. Once Trump gets his cabinet together, they should be called the hacks and the quacks.
You think? I prefer the clown cabinet. I don't know.
We'll figure it out.
Yeah.
But, has anybody brought up that the half of the farm workers here are undocumented migrants, and also the meatpacking industry has thousands of them? So this is really going to disrupt the food supply chain if they start.
Oh, of course it is. Of course it is. I mean, the most difficult jobs and the poorest paying jobs in the country are frequently the ones that migrants take. I mean, there are already people in agriculture in California who are very concerned that there won't be people to pick the crops. I mean, I remember when Donald Trump was in office the first time, there's a Hispanic guy that we've done some business with around the house, and he was hiring other Hispanics new to the country and wanted to expand his business, doing a lot of landscaping and stuff like that. And when I asked him about booking some stuff, he said that he couldn't do it anymore, that everybody was afraid, and so they didn't want to commit to doing this kind of work. And I think we're going to see that. We're going to see a real, farmers especially who rely on migrant labor to pick the crops. I don't know. I hope that some of these folks belong to groups that have a lot of lobbying power, because, the idea of losing campaign money is going to be the only thing that softens Donald Trump's stance on this.
Yeah, and if you start paying farm workers $10, $12 an hour, then you're going to be paying a lot higher food prices, and that's going to be an issue later on.
Well, and you'll have to pay higher prices for those jobs because there will be a premium. There will be too few people to do them. So that's what's, I guess the good news is the people who are left will make better money than they currently do. But I think we're in for some interesting times.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, Ron.
Thank you. Hey.
Thanks. Let's go to Leo. What? Oh, well, Leo told Lady B that he's been very depressed since the election and that he listens to WCPT, and I think we are helping. He said that he believes that we are the voice of reason. And, one of the things that I'm going to do, Leo, going forward, there's going to be a lot of bad stuff. There's going to be a lot of stuff that gets us mad. And there's just nothing we can do about that. That's just simply a fact of life. That is going to happen. But I'm going to try to always offer something positive that we can do. And I'm going to not just make this show be the litany of today's outrage or today's outrages, because there will probably be more than one. We will try to keep you informed. We will try to let you know. We have to let you know the bad things that are happening, because that may be a topic that you've decided you care about, and that may be the thing that you're going to be an activist about. But make no mistake, kids, this is going to get worse before it gets better. 600 some days till the midterm elections. That is a long time. That is a long time. But we have to do what we can, and we have to try to stay positive. And toward that end, I'm going to, I think, reintroduce. Remember before the world caught on fire a million years ago, when I sometimes would do arts and culture? That's the kind of stuff we've really got to hang on to. I think that's the kind of stuff that can keep us sane when the world appears to be coming apart at the seams. So I am going to make this pledge to you now that as things get crazier and crazier, we will also always try to bring you the good. Things that might lift your soul, lift your spirits. That's the only way we're going to get through this. So I know Patty's very good at poking fun of the news. I'm not funny like she is, but, pet of the month, things like that. Talking about the arts, or, interesting books. Maybe we'll start a book recommendation. I don't know if we could do a book club, but maybe at least once a month I'll try to recommend a book that I think is worthwhile. Something like that. Because there's more to life than just surviving the next 4 years. We got to find joy. Life is too unreliable. You can wake up one morning and believe me, your life is completely different than it was the day before. And you got to remember big picture. Are you going to care so much about what Donald Trump's doing if you're diagnosed with cancer? There's a lot more to life than the outrages that are going to be coming our way. And we are going to, after the holidays, we are going to start embracing that on a regular basis. I promise you that. We're going to take a break. We're going to be back with John Shaw right after this.
Get social with WCPT 820 and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at WCPT 820.
This is Chicago's Progressive Talk, 820 AM, WCPT Willow Springs, and online at WCPT820.com, where facts matter.
Now back to Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
As promised, I am welcoming back to our program John Shaw, director of the Paul Simon Public Policy Institute. You can find said institute at Southern Illinois University at Carbondale. John, how are you? I hope you had a great Thanksgiving.
I did, Joan. Thank you so much for asking, and I hope you are well. And I caught just the end of that last segment, and I loved your sentiments. I think you totally nailed what we have to do going forward.
Yeah, I've been telling people that you're not going to be able to do everything. You're not going to be able to fight every kind of injustice. And I've been suggesting to people that they find something that it matters to them, whether it's libraries and books, whether it's women's autonomy and women's health care rights. Find, whether maybe it's immigration, find what it is that really, really makes you feel passionate and pursue that. But I also feel that we need to balance what is coming with the things in life that bring us joy. I think that's crucial.
I agree totally. And I just wanted to jump on one thing that you said in your last segment. You were talking about, finding books and so forth. And this is a little self-serving, but I think the last time we talked, I told you I had just written a book, which is called The Education of a Statesman. It came out in late October. And it's about a Swedish diplomat I've known for many years. And he says two things that I think are just directly relevant to what you said. I mean, one of his signature lines is, nobody can do everything. Everyone can do something. And that's his sort of motto, that you just have to find areas in which you can both make a difference and to give joy and to really focus on that. And the other things that he says all the time, and they're the last sentences in the book, he said, there's always hope. There's always a way. Giving up is undignified. And so I think, we have to balance both of those things, find areas of hope, but also to play the long game and realize that somehow we're going to survive the next 4 years, and it's going to be ugly and it's going to be chaotic. And, we have to pay attention, but not to the point that it makes our personal lives miserable and, and just, creates this kind of fog of gloom that we're never able to penetrate. So
I was talking with an expert on the Middle East yesterday, and they said, you need to be, if there's something that you want to work towards, you need to be strategic, but make it a strategic goal, not an operational goal. An operational goal, is more short term. It's a definite, did we do this or did we not? And we'll know in 30 days whether or not it's happening. Whereas if you're just strategic, you know where you want to get to, and you're willing, just exactly like what you just said, you're willing to play the long game.
Joan, I want to tell you something just real quick. I've started to write a monthly essay for the Tribune on statesmanship, and one of the things I'm looking for are just, glimmers of statesmanship that are occurring, across the country, and particularly in Illinois, but across the country. And my new column, I shouldn't scoop myself, but the column that I'm working on now is someone who's just wildly inspiring. Her name is Patricia McGuire. She is the president of Trinity Washington University in D.C. And this is someone who has utterly transformed a university that was in free fall and collapsing. And she started the presidency in 1989. And in the course of, as you say, the long game, over the course of many decades, she's completely refocused the school's mission. She's raised funds. She's built new facilities. She's the whole school now caters to African Americans and Latinos, and it just changed completely the demographic. So, I mean, there are plenty of examples in our life where people, can find, take control of institutions, take leadership of institutions, and rework them in a way that does great good. So I think that's right. I think we need to have a strategic sense of the long game, and I think that will really make, will give us energy in the months and 4 years ahead.
I want to jump right into Donald Trump's cabinet picks. I have, as of today, I've decided to call it the clown cabinet because people are clearly being chosen only on the basis of loyalty. No experience required, no background that would make you suitable for any particular job, just complete obedience to Donald Trump. Well, there are a couple of exceptions that I think snuck through. Just like in most administrations, they're mostly good people, but maybe a couple of bad ones slide through. In this administration, they're mostly bad, but a couple of almost good ones have also, not for full cabinet level positions, but some of the lesser positions seem to be it's like they ran out of incompetence and had to actually name one or two competent people to some of these roles. But the actual cabinet, John, it's a joke. I mean, certain people in Congress, Republicans in Congress, have said privately, some of them, that they think Tulsi Gabbard is a Russian asset, and she's supposed to be head of intelligence. You've got Pete Hegseth, who denies having any kind of problem with alcohol. But I say, if you've got to be carried to your hotel room more than once, you've got a problem with alcohol. I mean, what do you think about what you see here?
On one level, it's shocking. I mean, and I agree with you. I mean, it's almost like if Trump clearly went out of his way to pick people who, as you say, were completely loyal. And also it almost seems to just anger, the 49.5% of the country who voted against him. So there's no sense of a coherent vetting process. I mean, that goes without saying. The picks, I mean, and I guess the Hegseth is the one that has just been, I found, most unsettling because, this guy would be in the chain of command for, nuclear weapons, could literally have the fate of, hundreds of millions of people. I don't want to overstate it, but I mean, he would have
be in the Situation Room.
Yeah, and this, I mean, and as people have pointed out, I mean, most of the focus has been on his, astonishing character deficiencies, which even reading his mother's email is just beyond painful. But beyond that, I mean, there's just nothing that shows that he's been able to run an entity more than two or three people with even modest success. So to have the entire military, placed under him, and people, whose careers are based on following orders and putting themselves in harm's way. I mean, that's the one pick that was, goes beyond astonishing and is just, deeply, deeply threatening to the country. I mean, and Tulsi Gabbard too. I mean, she obviously, has no experience in intelligence matters, very, very quirky views on international affairs, and as you say, and others have laid out, a very, very dubious connection to the Putin and his gang. So those were the two that just sort of leapt out at me. And so I mean almost to your point, when someone like a Marco Rubio, who I don't mean to be too harsh, but I think he's considered a kind of average to mediocre senator. I mean, not bad, but certainly not in any way a star of the Senate. It's sort of like, okay, we'll take him for Secretary of State because he's not totally crazy. Likewise, Elise Stefanik, who I think, has been deeply, deeply cynical on a lot of issues. I think particularly the way she was, she played the game last year on the college presidents and just really kind of exploited the whole Gaza situation. As a UN ambassador in any other administration, the pick would be surprising, disappointing, maybe, appalling. But in this administration, it's like, well, she's at least not totally crazy, So
Adam Kinzinger has some interesting things to say about her, and this was long before she was appointed. In the documentary that I saw, he talked about some of the people that he had interacted with when he was in Congress. And he said, when he first got to Congress, Elise Stefanik was one of the people that he really liked. He said she was sensible, she was honest. And he looked at the camera and he said, I have no idea what happened to her.
Yeah, no, I've seen him speak of her in that framework as well. So, but yeah, I mean, and then you say, obviously, Kash Patel at FBI is beyond, shocking and appalling. But then you have someone like the Treasury Secretary nomination, Scott Bessent, who it seems at least is a mainstream type of operator. But again, and I guess this is the overarching point that I would make is like, why would you want to be in the cabinet? I mean, did they not pay attention to what happened to Jeff Sessions and Rex Tillerson? The moment you say one thing that takes you out of favor with Donald Trump, you could get your career ended by a tweet. So what is even the appeal of being in the Trump cabinet? I don't get that.
I don't either. And I've asked other people about this because Trump lawyers, get either disbarred, convicted. Trump, when he was in office the first time, now Bill Barr was head of the DOJ, so he took no action on this. But how many members of the original Trump cabinet were recommended for criminal prosecution? It was 3 or 4 of them because they were grifters and they were using their department's money, to charter private jets and all of these fancy hotel stays and all of this stuff that was so outrageous that they were recommended to the DOJ for criminal prosecution. And it was only because Bill Barr was still sucking up to Donald Trump that nothing ever happened. I mean, everything Trump touches dies, but people keep going. They keep thinking, man, it's not going to happen to me. He likes me. He's going to treat me different, John.
Yeah, and I don't understand that psychology. Because anyone with even the most minimal instinct of self-preservation, you think you have to at least look at the people who occupied the position right before you and see what their fate is, and just not take a deep breath and say that could be my fate. So I don't understand, why anyone would want to be in the cabinet, and I don't. And it's of course going to be interesting to see how the confirmation process goes forward, because I'm sure privately there's probably at least a dozen senators, if not more, who are deeply, deeply appalled at these nominees. But and frankly, they probably think that they could maybe go against Trump once or twice amidst this whole slate, that they could probably do that once or twice without facing the threat of a primary. So it's going to be very interesting to see how the hearings unfold and to see just what happens to the fate. And I guess I think what probably the Democrats and some of the more the handful of independent Republicans probably will just try to identify, 2 or 3 of the ones who are just utterly unacceptable. And maybe it's, Hegseth, Gabbard, and
how about Kash Patel?
Yeah, those 3, and just maybe try to block those nominations and just kind of give up on the others. And so, yeah, we will see. It's going to be a very interesting confirmation process.
Yeah. John, we need to take a break. I'm talking, sorry, a little froggy there. I'm talking with John Shaw, director of the Paul Simon Public Policy Institute. We're going to take a break. Be back with more after this.
Chicago's Progressive Talk, WCPT 820, where facts matter.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
And I'm joined by John Shaw, director of the Paul Simon Public Policy Institute. John, I want to play a little clip that was posted by Katie Couric. She has her own media company now, and she interviewed a sociologist by the name of Arlie Russell Hochschild. And this woman has spent at least the last decade in red areas researching why voters are drawn to Donald Trump. And she says it's not just, the issues that we've been told over and over again. It's inflation, it's the economy, it's climate change, it's trans rights. She does not believe those are maybe the easy things for people to report. But she thinks that the reason voters are drawn to Donald Trump runs much deeper and has to do with feelings that people have, feelings of loss, feelings of shame, feelings of pride. I thought this clip was just really fascinating. I want to play it for you now and get your reaction to this. Lady B, go ahead and play that.
Most of the people I've talked to have given up on mainstream governments, Republican or Democrat. They have not found answers to their pressing problems. They are frightened that either women and blacks will compete with them, drive them down further internally, or that immigrants will come in, take those good jobs and government services. So they feeling frightened and a sense of loss. So they have turned to a charismatic figure who works through emotions. And that's why it's important. I believe, for example, that Donald Trump they were predisposed to look for an answer to their pressing needs and fears and shame, unwarranted, unwelcome shame. And Trump, I think, has answered it. I think actually as a person, he's experienced shame, a very harsh father, and that would be neither here nor there, except that it's given him enormous insight into the pain of unwarranted shame that a lot of blue-collar men who feel in free fall have felt. And he, I think, offers a 4-moment anti-shaming ritual that unless we are bilingual, we don't hear. Moment 1 of this anti-shaming ritual is Donald Trump will say something transgressive, like Asian immigrants are cooking and eating your pet cats and dogs. Okay, moment 2, the punditry shames Donald Trump and says, you can't say that. I mean, there was one article, but it turns out it's not true, and you don't repeat something that isn't true. Moment 3, Donald Trump becomes the victim of the shamers. Look how hard it is to be put down, to be vilified. And have you been put down? Have they put you down too? Yeah, well, they're putting me down. I'm actually taking the hit for you. And moment 4, he gets revenge for the shaming. He tells them off. He turns shame to blame.
Mr. Shaw, your thoughts on that?
Wow, that was, I'm going to watch the whole interview. I mean, so many intriguing points. And one of I've just, caught the 2 minutes you played, but, it is a pretty profound statement of some of the things that are going on. I mean, 2 or 3 things I'd play off of. I think the one thing that I did not grasp was just the potency of the immigration issue, and really the way that Trump used it to just sort of frame his own campaign and sort of his whole theme that, the system is rigged. The world is a fearful, ugly place. Your jobs are slipping away. Your communities are in peril. Your kids are not safe. And just the way that he used immigration as just a total hammer, and the Democrats were in retreat the whole time. I mean, the best they could do was to kind of embrace to keep referring to the bipartisan immigration bill that probably many of them didn't really support, but the fact that Trump killed it, gave them at least something to kind of throw back at him. So I think the immigration issue was really profound, and I do think that her comment on just Trump's mastery of the emotions and the fears and the insecurities of, working class Americans, primarily white working class Americans. And the irony is, and I guess this is the part of it that I've never understood and still don't, which is, you do not need to be a psychological expert or sociologist to have a pretty clear sense that Trump has absolutely no interest in their lives. I mean, he's never shown that he's cared about these people in his real life. I mean, his whole life is kind of a litany of treating these sorts of people disrespectfully when he dealt with them in person, never designed programs that speak to their needs, and yet somehow has gotten their votes and their support. And I think the analysis which we just heard is about the best that I've been able to kind of glean about how he's able to kind of touch people in the areas in which they feel vulnerable and shamed, and they develop an empathy and kind of a support for Trump by the way that he kind of throws it back at people. So yeah, that was a profound analysis that I'd like to read more carefully and think about more, because that was pretty impressive. Joan, I will say someone else who I think is terrific for understanding this moment is George Packer with The Atlantic. He is one of the most astute writers on American politics, and he has been he wrote this book about a decade ago called The Great Unraveling, which was largely about this, about the plight of white middle class America that was seeing the jobs leave and factories flee town. And he's been saying for years that the Democrats have not been able to find a language to speak to them, a language which shows that they actually care about their plight. And that, Packer made an argument that actually Rahm Emanuel made again this week in a podcast with Ezra Klein, in which the Democratic Party somehow has become tagged as the establishment party, the elite party, the coastal party, the heavily credentialed party that looks scornfully down on the rest of the country and is contemptuous of them. And they got to break out of that mold, or it's going to be tough going. Joe, one other point that I think we have to make, and it's really important, and I know we'll probably talk in a bit about Harris's campaign. It's very, very possible people are overreacting to just what happened. I mean, this was not, if Trump had won, 60-40, that would be, gobsmacking. He won 49-48 or 48-47. Still shocking to me and to you and to many others. But, before you just, disband, the Democratic Party and, start from scratch, at least pay attention to their, 2 or 3 seats short of a majority in the House. Harris came with a 100-day campaign, came pretty darn close to beating Trump. So it's important not to just completely overreact to what happened. It's important to react to what happened, because it was, it's when Donald Trump wins twice against your candidates, you have to sort of wonder what's going on. Yeah, very, very much so. And I don't think that she was giving some insight into this most recent loss, but she's been studying this for 10 years now. And I think that, she's said some things that other people have said before. There seems to be, particularly among a certain segment of white men, this idea that somehow,
that if brown and black people and women, are rising up, then that must mean that they are being subjugated, that it's not like there's enough for everybody. There are enough jobs for everybody. There's enough everything for everybody. But no, the more inroads that these other groups may make is somehow taking away from them, which, isn't really reliably backed up by any data, but it is a very powerful belief.
No, I think so. I mean, I think there is this sense of a zero-sum game in which, the achievements of, as you say, the other are, direct threats on your livelihood and your way of being and your future prospects. And so the success of others is not something to be celebrated or even to be neutral about, but to be feared. Joan, one other point I want to play off, and I wonder if you've had guests who've spoken to this. Over the holidays, part of my family has moved to Milwaukee, so I went up there with my wife and talked to a couple of my nephews who are college-age guys, and they are, they're left of center, and they voted for Harris. But they said, and this was even college-age kids, they said a number of their friends voted for Trump, and it was considered kind of a cool thing to do, to vote for Trump. Well, and that's what I don't get. I mean, that is what I was just incredulous when I heard him say that. It's like, what is it about his appeal, his message that is even, remotely appealing or worthy of, support or emulation? So I don't know. And I'm sure at elite colleges, that would, the so-called elite colleges, that would be far less true. But I just wonder, as you go, up and down the Big Ten and, other schools across the country. I mean, I have not seen the numbers on just how college-age students voted. But I was just struck by the fact, by several of them saying that supporting Trump was considered not only acceptable, but in some level kind of cool, and that it was kind of hard to say I voted for Harris. Again, something I found really, really hard to understand.
John, we need to talk more about this, and we are up against the news. So hold that thought. We are coming back to this whole, because there are some things that I want to say about this whole, especially young men thinking it's cool to vote for Trump. We will be right back after this.
Hey, where's Hal Sparks? I'm not sure where he is now, but I know where you can find him Saturdays at 11. He'll be right here on WCPT 820 for the Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide. Because facts matter. You're listening to WCPT 820.
Joan Esposito, live.
Celebrating our power to bring about change.
Local.
Everybody has to work together.
And progressive.
I think you get the idea.
On WCPT 820.
With me is John Shaw, the director of the Paul Simon Public Policy Institute. That's at Southern Illinois University, Carbondale. We were just talking, and John said something about having a conversation with some young men who apparently felt that it was cool to vote for Donald Trump. And, John, I want to talk more about this because, within 24 hours of Donald Trump winning the election, there were certain young men who, en masse, were posting "Your body, my choice." And Nick Fuentes, the white supremacist, posted "Your body, my choice forever." There seems to be a surprising amount of misogyny, especially in young white males. What do you make of that?
This is where I feel really, really old, Joan, because I just don't get it. I just don't get it. And I understand. I read. I'm paying attention to what's going on in American life, or at least I've been trying to. But I just don't understand this, extraordinary sense of grievance. So I don't know what to say. I think that, obviously the economy is changing and,
But, John, it isn't just here. I was reading about the attempted coup in South Korea. And apparently this current South Korean president is a sort of a Trump-like figure, very, very populist. And one analysis of his winning the election and his popularity said that he was very, very blatant in his misogyny, appealing to young South Korean men like, oh, the women are taking your jobs and they should be at home, and being very, very blatant about it. So this whole idea that somehow young white men just don't have the advantages that their sex and race should provide for them isn't limited to this country.
Yeah, and again, here I just feel like I need to go back to school on this and just figure out what's going on. I mean, it just seems that, and I guess it seems so surprising because I guess I've always had the sense that, there's been lots of sweeping cultural change over the last generation or so, but I've sensed that somehow, that as a society we've adjusted, and there's just this kind of overall sense of tolerance, and particularly among the young, the sense of, we're in this together and let's move forward. So I do not understand this deep grievance on the part of young men, white in particular, but also, African American, because many of them, and Latino, who, have found Trump's message far more appealing than I could ever imagine. So, maybe Katie Couric can get another sociologist on to delve into this, because it is it's seemingly a powerful force in the world, and I just don't quite understand what's at root. And I guess the part of the thing that still baffles me is just the economic security piece, because I know the economy is changing and things are difficult, but we still have, by most measures, a full employment economy. Mm-hmm. This is it. My dad used to. He died a few years ago, but he was of the World War II generation, and I mean he was an open-minded, liberal thinking. But on this issue, he would be pretty firm. He'd say, "Look, I grew up during the Depression. I grew up on a farm in Iowa. We had to work through the Depression, in which foreclosures were everywhere. I had the privilege of going to Korea twice, et cetera, et cetera." He says, if anyone should feel aggrieved, maybe I might have a bite at the apple, but hell, I don't. I feel like this country has treated me well, and I've had enormous opportunities, and I just feel grateful. So I don't. And he would say, I mean, in a full employment economy, how come everyone is just talking about economic grievance? Now, again, back in the day, he worked for Caterpillar his whole career, and he was an engineer, and he had good health benefits that stayed with him for his entire life, and a pension that almost no one has now. So, and he understood and acknowledged all that. But yeah, there's a need for some really deep thinking on just how this kind of pervasive gloom and sense of grievance has gripped so many populations, both in the United States and around the world.
I don't know about around the world, but in the United States, I have to believe that first of all, right-wing media is pervasive. They own more radio stations, more local TV stations, more cable outlets than Democrats could dream of. And I think there is this steady drumbeat of "you're getting screwed." And Tom Nichols, who writes for The Atlantic, was recounting, he was interviewed by our Saturday host, Edwin, and he was recounting a conversation that he was having with a guy he'd known since childhood. So he said, we are able to be very blunt with one another. And this guy, who presumably is in the same demographic as Tom, I'm assuming late 50s or so, maybe early 60s, this guy was telling Tom Nichols about just how angry he was and how he really feels like he's been screwed over. And Tom said, now you've got to understand, this is a guy who owns his own home, put 2 kids through college, and, oh, by the way, also owns a boat. And this guy was going on and on about just how angry he was. And Tom said that he looked at him at one point. He said, so did you come to this conclusion when you were out on your boat? And it's this idea that no matter how successful somebody's been, the drumbeat from places like Fox and places like Newsmax and the Sinclair stations and conservative radio is, you're getting a raw deal. You're getting a raw deal. These others are taking stuff and positions and money that should be yours. You're getting a raw deal. How much of a role do you think that drumbeat has in affecting people's perceptions of whether or not they are successful?
I think huge. I mean, I don't follow that ecosystem super closely. I mean, I'm aware of it, but I do think that is a really powerful explanation. And I do think, I just hear, glancing references to that kind of narrative. But I have to think, that narrative is more, is a powerful force that needs to be understood, and it's as important, if not important, than the objective circumstances of people's lives. Because I think that, I know people are struggling, but I just don't think the objective circumstances of people's lives are such that it, should spur this, this kind of, an unrelenting sense of grievance and being betrayed.
Some people have said that the Democrats have really, really dropped the ball when it comes to dominating media. Fox, I think, Fox Cable debuted in 1996. So there has been, between conservative radio, conservative cable, this has been an ecosystem that has been being built for a very long time. And there has been really, Air America, which was around for a while. There's really been no Democratic equivalent. What role do you think that plays? And should Democrats make a concerted effort to start acquiring media?
Yeah, that's. I guess my first reaction is yes. But and this is where I think I want to think about it more carefully, because I do think that the narrative of grievance is, in some sense, easier to develop, more susceptible to getting strong reactions than a narrative of appreciation and hopefulness. I don't know. But I don't think that the Democrats and progressives should just cede this ground to the other perspective. So yeah, I do think there obviously has to be some enormously hard work about trying to think through how to communicate. Because that clearly is a huge factor in Trump's success, that he has this whole kind of undercurrent of grievance that has been ignited, and he's just been able to throw the match on the fire. So yeah, I think that I hope some really smart people on the progressive people, problem solving people, try to figure out how to communicate that message and their message in a better way.
I'm talking with John Shaw from the Paul Simon Public Policy Institute. We're going to take a real quick break and be back with more after this.
Podcasts of Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive, are available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, YouTube, and Amazon. Just search for Joan Esposito.
Hey Google, play WCPT.
Streaming Chicago's progressive talk from TuneIn.
Now back to Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
And I'm joined by John Shaw from the Paul Simon Public Policy Institute. I want to shift gears a little bit, John, and while I'm not going to spend our final time together trying to do some kind of post-mortem on the election, I did something this morning that I don't usually do. I was looking at some of the parts of the interview that Tim Walz gave to a local Minnesota television station, talking about, could you have done more? Well, I frankly thought we were going to win, but since we didn't, it's pretty obvious we could have, should have done more. And the interview itself was typical Tim Walz, very, very hopeful, but very self-effacing and acknowledging what happened. But what I don't usually do is I don't usually read the comments after something like that is posted on social media. And I have no idea what possessed me to do it today. But I thought a lot of the comments were really, really interesting. And a couple of people, I guess I was so struck with, the wonder that was Kamala Harris on the campaign trail, that it didn't really occur to me that we weren't seeing quite as much of Tim Walz. And a couple of the people who commented believed that, because, Kamala Harris famously hired a bunch of the Obama people to do her campaign. And the feeling seems to be on social media that those people purposely sidelined Tim Walz, that he was purposely taken away from anything high profile on the campaign trail. And since we now know that a lot of uncollege educated or blue collar voters were a big part of Trump's success, and that is the audience that Tim Walz knows how to speak to, it appears that that was a really strategic error on the part of the Harris campaign. Again, wasn't really obvious at the time. I saw a speech here and there, and I would see little clips. I remember one clip I saw posted on social media where Tim Walz was sitting down in some town with a farmer and some guy who owned like a small business. There were three guys who were, blue-collar-ish sort of people. And the conversation Tim Walz had with them was really breathtaking. He spoke their language. He knew the terminology. He understood what the farmers' concerns were and the small business guys' concerns were. And when I read these comments that said that her campaign decided to kind of sideline him, and that was a mistake, and then I remember seeing that conversation where he really seemed like he could be the person to reach out to that audience, I was really struck by, maybe this was something that could have been done differently. Do you agree with anything I've just said or anything these people have posted?
I have a couple of thoughts. First of all, I thought Walz, made a really compelling entrance into the race, and it was, okay, yeah, he really makes sense. I thought he lost some of his luster as the campaign went on, and maybe it was because he was marginalized and pushed aside, but I think, it always happens that the vice presidential candidate, after the initial introduction drifts off, into less significance. I think I don't think he did great in the debate against Vance, and I think that may have dimmed.
I don't think he did either, but apparently when he was being vetted for the vice president job, he was very upfront. He said to them, I am not a good debater. And I think he showed us that because everybody was like, he's so folksy and he's so down to earth. He's going to just make mincemeat of J.D. Vance. And instead, J.D. Vance sort of ran circles around him. He seemed really, really uncomfortable. He seemed really nervous. And maybe somebody should have listened to him,
Well, but let me throw this out. And this was, I hate to be totally anecdotal, but again, over Thanksgiving, I was visiting with family in Milwaukee, and I have a niece who's in her mid-20s, smart as can be, left of center, progressive, but also kind of a blunt speaker. And we're talking about the election. I said, I made these same points. I think maybe Walz should have played a higher profile. And she said, you know what? I tired of him very quickly. He just seemed too blubbery and weak to me. And I was just stunned at just that kind of scathing. I said, really, where does that come from? And she said, the Democrats, they need to present candidates who come across in a stronger way than Walz did. I don't know what to make of that particular comment. I mean, I'm not going to read too much into one observation.
She didn't say to you, well, I didn't make up my mind to him till I saw him in the debate. I thought he was weak, or it was when he appeared here, or she didn't have a specific turning point.
No, she didn't. I mean, she just made kind of a more sweeping assessment that she just did not find him a strong candidate. And again, she's not one of these macho gals who's runs around with that kind of ideal in her mind. So I was struck. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know that Walz was a determining factor or even a significant factor. I mean, I think I don't think they found ways for him to be able to communicate that, the Democrats were on the side of the working people. And that was sort of what he was all about, the coach, the guy with the baseball cap who can go to the local diner and, order a cup of coffee without needing, coaching like J.D. Vance did. So yeah, I don't know. Ultimately, I don't know that Walz gave the ticket the kind of energy that I think some people hoped, and whether it was because he was marginalized or whether they lost confidence after the debate and the Harris team just kind of, pushed him into smaller markets. I don't know. I mean, I don't think he gave the campaign the boost that a lot of people were hoping, and why that's the case, I think is at least to me unclear.
Also in the comments, several people pointed out the influence of Elon Musk and his money. It's now being reported that Musk spent as much as $150 million through various donations, various PACs to get Donald Trump elected. I mean, it's already been revealed that one of the PACs that he funded, their job was to micro-target, particularly Jews and Muslims, to remind them, how ambivalent they were about Joe Biden, not to get them to vote for Donald Trump, but just to get them, sort of ambivalent enough to not vote at all. Elon Musk and his money, because now people are saying that Elon Musk bought Donald Trump the presidency. What do you think about that?
I'm not persuaded. I mean, I think the resources came in handy, but Harris had, strong resources too. So I don't know. I don't necessarily buy the Elon Musk conspiracy theory. I don't know. I mean, I'll reserve judgment. I haven't done a deep study on it, but I just don't know. I mean, maybe a little off point. I am going to make a prediction that Musk will last in this current job about 3 months, and then he'll get bored and move on to something else. I mean, he and Mr. Ramaswamy do not have the kind of, dig into the details and really kind of understand how the federal government works. I mean, they're jumping into this, quote, government efficiency entity, and they will push it for about 2 or 3 months, and then they'll get bored and move on to something else. So I don't see them as significant players in this administration, at least in an official, overt way. Presumably, Musk will have some behind-the-scenes clout, but I doubt that he will be a major public figure in the Trump administration.
Or between now and that 3-month deadline you've set, Donald Trump decides that there can be only one narcissist in chief, and it's not going to be Elon Musk. It must be him. Because, people like that, they're used to being the big dog, and it doesn't work when you've got a number of people who think they are the big dog. So we'll see. But the only thing that I do hope that Musk and Ramaswamy accomplished, they've talked about getting rid of daylight savings time, which is something that's been talked about for ages. If they could do that and then, get bored and move on to other things, I would say, gentlemen, job well done.
Okay. I don't have a strong feeling on daylight savings time as that, but yeah, if we can limit their impact to that issue, I'll take that as a moral victory.
Yeah. So, and for some people who are they're part of the clown cabinet, but on the bubble and probably will be confirmed, like say Bobby Kennedy Jr. Now, people are talking about, obviously, his anti-vaccine stuff, what he wants to do to take apart the FDA. But he has also always been an advocate for, people eating right. And, I've seen a couple of people say that, well, if he can, sort of reform the food industry and get rid of or minimize, processed foods, maybe he can accomplish something. The problem is, if I were Bobby Kennedy or his advisor, I would say, look, you're controversial, so start off with something everybody can get behind. Not getting fluoride out of the water, but how about, having a healthier experience at the grocery store? Unfortunately, I don't think that's going to happen. I think that's wishful thinking on my part. But if Elon Musk were smart and Bobby Kennedy were smart, they would pick something that's popular and start with that. And then maybe their critics would be at least muted, if not silenced.
I agree. I mean, I think it makes a lot of sense to get an early win and just show credibility. And to me, maybe I'm wrong, but it was Bobby Kennedy. I see him there for about 18 months and then just being overwhelmed by the bureaucracy and deciding he'd rather do something else. I mean, I don't see the kind of person who's going to, roll up his sleeves and just, really dig deeply into policy and study how to move policy and how to build coalitions. I mean, that's just not who he is. So
I'm shocked, Mr. Shaw, that you don't think these are
in 18 months we're going to have a new secretary. That's my prediction.
Okay. John Shaw, director of the Paul Simon Public Policy Institute. John, it is a pleasure as always. Thank you so much.
Always fun, Joan. Be well. Bye-bye.
We are going to take a break. We're going to be back with our good friend Bill Scheer. Bill Scheer from Washington Monthly Magazine right after this.
This is Chicago's Progressive Talk, 820 AM, WCPT Willow Springs, and online at WCPT820.com, where facts matter.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
I am so pleased to welcome back Bill Scheer from Washington Monthly Magazine to our airwaves. Bill, how are you?
Every day, one step at a time.
Yeah, I hear you. It's bad enough now, and he's not even been sworn in, and it's going to be some busy days. I love your most recent article about Biden's pardons. I have been saying this for weeks, that he needs to, there were rumors before Donald Trump left office that he had written up secret pardons, like for his daughter and son-in-law and his boys, and I guess, I don't know, maybe Hope Hicks, who knows, but that they weren't announced, but that they were written up, and if you were charged with something, like Jared was taken to task for something, he could whip this pardon out and say, oh, no, you don't. Look at me. Look what I've got. I think Joe Biden should be writing up, doing nothing but throughout the entire weekend, just pardon after pardon after pardon. Doesn't have to be public about it. As a matter of fact, Karine Jean-Pierre said today that there are more pardons coming. And you would think that at least the people who Kash Patel says he's going to prosecute, like Liz Cheney, would get those. Tell me about your take on this whole pardon process.
Well, Patel has a list of about 60 people in his book that he says are part of a cabal of unelected tyrants. And Donald Trump, over the course of the past 3 years, has talked about prosecuting and imprisoning about 70 people. Politico did a collection of all those comments a few weeks ago. Actually, those two lists actually do not have a lot of overlap. So you're talking more than 100 people between the two of them who have been openly talked about as deserving of prosecution for no basis whatsoever. And I think it's wholly appropriate for Joe Biden to say, I'm going to protect you from the possibility
of politicized, weaponized prosecution with a blanket pardon for anything that might have happened over a certain period of time. I really don't understand the counter argument. Politico recently said there was some debate in the administration about it, and some talking about how this could, feed Trump's narrative. And I'm like, the narrative's already Trump has his narrative.
Exactly.
You have to worry about it over fueling it. Like, he won. Like, it is fueled. He's getting the Oval Office. That downside is already being realized. All you can do now is protect some individuals from not having to go through a horrible experience for multiple years. I mean, it may be that the judiciary holds, they don't actually get convicted, but what they'd have to go through in that process would be torturous. So spare them that.
Mm-hmm. And I don't know whether or not he was on the Kash Patel enemies list, but there were reports that Kash Patel had said that one of his goals after he's in charge of the FBI is making sure that Hunter Biden spends years in federal prison. So I don't understand this. Oh, Joe Biden said he wasn't going to pardon Hunter, and now he did. Oh, my gosh, it's the end of democracy as we know it. I just want to take those people and knock their heads together, because I forget about the fact that it was his son. Anybody who is threatened by these crooks that are coming in, I mean, dear God in heaven, Donald Trump pardoned Charles Kushner, who admitted his guilt, and now that guy is going to be the ambassador to France. Somebody I was listening to said, well, maybe... Oh, Rachel Maddow said, that maybe this Hunter Biden pardon would have gone down better if Joe Biden had said, I'm pardoning him and I'm making him the ambassador to France.
Yeah, I mean, all sorts of, standards of ethics are being completely shredded. Now, I understand the argument. That doesn't mean Democrats should respond in kind and destroy all their sense of decency as well. So I don't want to go to that place where it's all just a downward spiral into the abyss. I think the Hunter situation, I see both sides of the argument with Hunter, but I think it is a fair argument to say that he's admitted to certain crimes. He's admitted to having the tax violation. He admitted that he was a drug addict at the time that he had filled out the score about the gun. But there's a very fair argument, which is anyone else who had committed those specific crimes, who admitted to it, who paid their back taxes, wouldn't be subject to this level of prosecution and risk of severe sentencing, and therefore he should be pardoned on that grounds. Maybe if I was in Joe Biden's position, I would do a commutation, not a pardon, for things that he admitted to. But we're kind of nitpicking there, and I don't think this one example outweighs the mountains of dishonesty and graft and obliteration of conflicts of interest that we're seeing before our eyes. So to get that upset about it, it strikes me as disproportionate.
I truly don't understand the hand-wringing over this. I did not see it, but I've just seen reports of it. Somebody who I used to respect, like Jon Stewart over at The Daily Show, apparently did this whole rant that basically was because Joe Biden pardoned Hunter Biden, like democracy as we know it is over. Which, I understand that he makes his living being hyperbolic, but I do not understand that kind of hand-wringing. I thought Rachel Maddow nailed it, that clearly even the prosecution, the crimes, quote unquote, that he had committed generally are not pursued, especially, when there was never a crime committed. The gun was in his possession for a short time. The man was an admitted drug addict. He's gotten treatment. Well, for the tax thing, when he was, got the bill from the IRS, he paid it. And, just as it seems like the judicial system bends over backward to treat Donald Trump with kid gloves, I really felt that this time that Hunter Biden was being attacked as a way to get to Joe Biden. And I don't, maybe I'm the only one who sees it that way. Maybe I'm the only one who, is linking up those particular dots. But I've really been shocked and disappointed by the hand-wringing that has happened in Democratic circles with this pardon. Are you shocked by that reaction?
I wouldn't say I'm shocked. I mean, I think there's always people who want to, find an opportunity to show that they're above partisanship, that they're not blind partisans. And look, there is an argument to make. I'm not saying it's illegitimate to say Joe Biden shouldn't have done it. He was convicted. They let the process play out. It's preferential treatment. Like, I understand those arguments. And if you want to make the arguments, go ahead. But again, we don't want to bring about any kind of false equivalency. This means that Joe Biden is as unethical as Donald Trump. I mean, Joe Biden's administration, political appointees in Joe Biden's administration, literally zero indictments, zero convictions. Even Barack Obama was a pretty squeaky clean administration, but even he had David Petraeus at the CIA who had to plead guilty to mishandling classified information when he fed it to his mistress. So even Obama didn't bat 1,000. But you look at the Trump administration in the first term, you look at Ronald Reagan administration, you look at the Clinton administration, which had its problems. To actually be to throw a perfect game ethically and have no convictions or indictments is not what always happens. Mm-hmm. And just because Joe Biden was in a very unusual situation where his own son, who had already gone through hell with a crack addiction and was getting back on his own 2 feet and got hit with what he sees as an overly severe prosecution, I understand the academic argument that this should have gone through proper channels, not a preferential treatment. It's a fair argument to make, but you can have a little bit of sympathy for the predicament that Joe Biden was in and look at the broader picture and say, you know what, on the whole, this has been a pretty ethical guy. We're in a pretty ethical shop. He is in no way like Donald Trump, and let's not let this one very complicated situation obscure the fact that someone is entering the Oval Office who is literally found liable of sexual abuse, literally convicted of fraud, literally pardoned a whole bunch of people in his first term without going through proper channels, several of whom have committed crimes since, and have a properly balanced perspective on those situations.
Along those lines, do you think in this clown cabinet or the administration, do you think there is any place for Rudy Giuliani, or do you think Trump is done with him?
Unless there's some news that I'm not aware of, I wasn't aware that he was being considered for something. But I put nothing past Donald Trump. I mean, he's already putting forth people who are unqualified, who should be disqualified for various transgressions. And the notion that someone would fall off of his short list because of past unethical acts, that does not seem to be the criteria that Donald Trump uses for his position. So it's hard to be shocked at this point, whatever transpires.
Rudy Giuliani is supposed to be in court on January 20th, and I didn't hear whether or not the judge was going to seriously entertain this, but he apparently filed an appeal that said he really can't. The trial shouldn't start then. He really can't be in court because he's got to be at the inauguration. So can we move this date? Because I'd really like to go to Washington and be at the inauguration.
I mean, these are shameless people. They practice delay tactics. They come up with spurious, disingenuous arguments to try to delay the reckonings and delay accountability. And look, it's worked for Donald Trump. You can't blame him for trying what has worked. You can't blame him for trying to stall and see if they can get some kind of appeal going. and delay a payment, delay jail time. At some point we all died. If you can delay long enough, maybe you don't have to pay the piper. So it doesn't shock me that they're trying everything in the books.
Oh, Bill, we got to take a break. I'm talking to Bill Scher, politics editor at Washington Monthly. We're going to talk about Canada when we come right back after this.
Take Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive with you on the go by using the TuneIn app on your phone. Just search for WCPT 820.
WCPT 820, Chicago's progressive talk, where facts matter.
Attention, everyone. Don't turn that dial. Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive, returns right now on WCPT 820.
I'm talking with Washington Monthly Magazine political editor Bill Scher, and he wrote recently that Justin Trudeau is blowing it. Why do you have such harsh words, Bill, for the Canadian Prime Minister?
Well, as I think you know, Donald Trump has threatened 25% tariffs on all Canadian imported goods and Mexican imported goods. So he would do it on day one. He had nothing to be shocked by. Donald Trump the first time around was always much harsher towards our allies and to our enemies. He has an infatuation with tariffs. He refuses to draw the connection between his stated belief that prices should be lower and what happens when you impose tariffs, which is make the cost of goods higher. I understand that leaders in foreign countries don't want to have their economies be upended. They realize that you don't always have to personally like the leaders of other countries. America has to deal with all sorts of foreign leaders who are unsavory. Real politics comes into play at all points when you're a head of government or head of state. But to let Donald Trump bully the world does not serve anybody's long-term interest. And it should be recognized that when Donald Trump threatens a tariff, he is not working with much of a mandate. He was, all evidence suggests he was mandated on a belief that he would make things cheaper, not make things more expensive. And even though he said he would raise tariffs, even though Kamala Harris said that was effectively a national sales tax, people did not make the connection. Otherwise, he would not have won. And so if the first thing he does in office is make the cost of goods higher, Americans are going to be unhappy. And that's going to weaken Trump's negotiating leverage. So Justin Trudeau did not have to go into this negotiation with a sense of having a weak hand. Donald Trump has the weak hand here. And Justin Trudeau, on top of all this, is already in a weak political position at home. He has terrible job approval ratings. He's been in office for 9 years, and so you hang around that long, it's not unusual that, a series of tough decisions, catches up with you. But he's been reluctant to step aside. If he wants to regain stature, then stand up for yourself. Stand up for your country.
I was just going to say that. Don't you think that Canadians would have rallied if Trudeau had said basically, you know what? You don't want to mess with us because you won't like what happens. I think that, you want to talk about job approval? I can't believe, I know the Canadians are supposed to be very chill, but I can't believe they wouldn't have gotten behind that.
I'm not a Canadian politician. I've never run for office in Canada. So to a certain extent, I understand Trudeau saying, look, I'm not with some American in the peanut gallery. Tell me what's going to appeal to Canadians. Be that as it may, he is the one who's in the hole right now. And he has leverage. I mean, he went to Mar-a-Lago, Justin Trudeau, and apparently Trump said to Trudeau over dinner, you're ripping us off for $100 billion with a $100 billion trade deficit, which, first off, isn't what the trade deficit is. It's about $64 billion, not 100. But a trade deficit is not getting fleeced. It means Canadians are producing goods at a cost where Americans want to buy them. And that includes things like steel, like lumber, like oil, like maple syrup. And if we didn't buy it from them and bought it here domestically, it would be more expensive, and the cost of all sorts of things would be more expensive. Now, if we're in a situation where Americans are being thrown out of work in these industries and there would be high unemployment, you might understand a certain reasoning behind wanting to protect those industries. We have reason to protect American automakers from low-cost Chinese electric cars because they're so inexpensive that if we didn't have any tariffs on them, the entire American auto industry could collapse overnight, and that would be very disruptive to the economy. So there are times when it makes some sense. But we've been buying these Canadian goods for a long time, and we still have American steel and timber industries. They've not all gone out of business, and unemployment right now is very low. So Trudeau can very easily say, you know what, Trump, I call your bluff. Go ahead and impose these tariffs. See how that works out for you. See how Americans like it when all these things that are essential to the American economy become more expensive overnight, and then come back to me. I would think there would be an appreciation. It might lead to some short-term upset in the Canadian economy, but the American economy at the same time. And Trump's the one who's supposedly on a honeymoon. Trudeau's the one who's in a jam. So I would think it makes sense for Trudeau to be the one to fight back and try to rally some Canadian pride.
Do you think that it was a concerted effort on the part of Trudeau? Because, Donald Trump loves people who suck up to him. Do you think that, that's what Trudeau was trying to do, regardless of what he really thought, regardless of what he really felt, rather than doing what you and I would have liked to have seen, which was basically him calling Trump's bluff? Do you think that the rather more obsequious response was designed to flatter Trump's ego and take Canada out of the crosshairs? I mean, I'm trying to put a good spin on it here, Bill.
Look, I understand that you're running your own country. You're trying to keep people employed. You don't want to cause a recession unnecessarily. The American president is who he is, and if the thinking is, I got to work with this guy no matter what. And look, that attitude served Trudeau relatively well in the first term. Trump made a lot of noise about NAFTA, made a lot of noise about pulling out of it abruptly. Some of Trump's own people got him to back off. That's going to hurt the farmers of America. These are your voters. Don't do that. So he was less drastic about it. And the negotiations that they had ended up having very mild reforms that Trump got to oversell as some sort of grand change of NAFTA. And Canadians' economy was fine after that. So I could understand Trudeau saying, hey, this worked for me last time, let's do that again this time. What I think is different this time is, number one, Trump is potentially much more unhinged. He doesn't have to really care what farmers think about him because he's not going to be on the ballot ever again. And number two, the Canadian federal elections are next year, and in all likelihood, the Conservatives are going to win because Trudeau's Liberals are so unpopular. So for Trudeau to plead, hey, don't hurt me, don't hurt the Canadian economy, that's not going to be very persuasive to Donald Trump, who might be very happy to see Trudeau sent packing. So I think the logic that applied in the first term doesn't strike me as having the same potency in the second go around.
Wow, you make a lot of sense. Maybe he just got caught by surprise. I don't know. I'm still making excuses for him. Which isn't my job, but he's always seemed to me a pretty sharp politician, and this seems like a pretty weird misstep to make. So it just seems like something else.
He's not the only person. I mean, almost every foreign leader, almost every corporate executive is being obsequious to Donald Trump.
How about Joe Scarborough and Mika Brzezinski? Oh, we went to Mar-a-Lago. We just felt we should, establish a dialogue.
All this stuff is happening in all sorts of places, and it's all very upsetting. So it might feel a little mean to sort of single Trudeau out here. Except I think that Trudeau had an opportunity here to be the one guy who doesn't do that. I think he has some political incentive to not do that, and political skill. I think he's a very compelling speaker. He's a very persuasive person, and he has a good argument to make. The arguments Trump is giving to justify his tariffs are factually wrong, and he could be the one to call him out on that and put him in his place.
Bill Scher, Washington Monthly magazine political editor. Love your writing, Bill. Please come back again soon.
My pleasure, as always.
That is going to do it for me today. Patty Vasquez will be here in just a few minutes. She's going to be joined by Scott Stantis. He's the cartoonist for the Chicago Tribune. And watch or listen to Edwin's show tomorrow. He's going to have David Pepper on. I love David Pepper. I was just thinking that I haven't talked to him for a while and I need to book him. And here, Edwin has scooped me. Charlotte Clymer will also be joining Edwin tomorrow. And I will see you Monday at 2 o'clock. Have a great weekend. I mean that, really. And have a great evening and good night.